The Same Dream, which I guess a lot of people might have played. So he was to join us here, but because of visa issues, he couldn't make the trip. So we are going to have a video keynote and Skype Q&A later. So yeah, Shruti.
Hello everybody, thank you for having me. I'm terribly sorry I couldn't be there physically, but physical presence is overrated anyway. So let me start. My name is Paolo, I'm from Italy. I've been living in the US for a bunch of years. And I guess at this point in time I pass as artist. But I'm not that interested in gallery spaces, museums, and prepare audiences. I'm not that interested in those white spaces where wealthy and cultured people hang out and look at art. I'm more interested in that range of artistic and cultural practices that are trying to go beyond these white boxes, practices that are intervening in the media space or in public spaces. I'm specifically more into that huge network of media created by bored office workers, bored students, internet surfers in general. Those people that all together contribute to the so-called viral diffusion of content on the net. I'm interested in injecting radical or at least smarter kind of memes in this flow of silliness. Most of my work is released under the project name Molleindustria. That means a soft factory or soft industry. It's a personal project, but I sometimes collaborate. And it deals with ideology and electronic entertainment, ideology and video games. The goal is to combine the old idea of social communication with the deconstructionist approach of culture jamming. So on one hand, using games as forms of communication, spreading alternative messages, using games as media. For example, this one is a game for a stem cell research campaign. It was like a referendum to prevent people from banning embryo research. So using games as kind of like propaganda. And on the other hand, Molleindustria is about messing with the language of mainstream games, be a sort of homeopathic remedy to the idiocy of mainstream games. So responding, reacting, and questioning mechanics, cliché, tropes that we take for granted. This is Fate Fighter, and it's a parody of a fighting game, except instead of having hypersexualized ethnic kind of characters, so you have cartoonish representations of figures from all the major world religions, and it's a commentary on the narrative of a clash of civilization, and of course it's a crass and oversimplified allegory of This is a more recent one that is also dealing with labor and alienation, but with a very different approach and very different style. Here you are a faceless, one-dimensional man trapped in his daily routine. You wake up always late for work, you commute, you sit in your cubicle, and then you wake up again. poses no challenges. You can be stuck in this loop forever. And most players actually get stuck in this loop forever and think that that's all the game, but intentional or not, the players will discover some subtle deviation from the norm. You can show up to work without pants and get fired, or you can stop the car in the middle of the highway and take a walk and go pet a cow. The game reaches a resolution when the player discovers all the possible ways to subvert his everyday life. Luckily, I don't really have this kind of cubicle job anymore, so let me tell you a couple of things to introduce you to the next game. I currently live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I teach in this building up here at the School of Art at Carnegie Mellon University. If you go down that street on the left, you see a building which is also part of the university. It's called the Robotics Institute. There at the Robotics Institute they do robots, that's the robotics department, and they do all sorts of robots. Some of them are cute, like this one, was made at CMU. Some other are a little bit freaky, they're kind of uncanny, like this snake robot, also a CMU product. Some of them are kind of scary. This is called the Crusher, and it's a military robot, unmanned, all-terrain, self-driving robot. The new model also has a gun on it. And they are all funded by the US military. This is a concept art for a flying Humvee called Transformer. It's a vehicle that can fly without a pilot. So if you go down the riverside, you'll see this building, which is also part of Carnegie Mellon. It's called the Entertainment Technology Center, or ETC. Inside it looks like this spaceship deck. There are life-size robots and characters from comics and science fiction and so on. And at the ETC they make video games and theme park rides and military research. This is a sample of their student project from a few years ago. There is an educational game. There is a project involving stealth bombers, and it's not a game about stealth bombers. It's actually military research for stealth bomber. And there are games for hospitalized children, and there is a project about surveillance called Panopticon or something. And it's sponsored by Lockheed Martin, which is one of the biggest military contractors in the US. So there is this strong connection between military technology and entertainment, which is has also a name, and people started to call it the military entertainment complex. It's kind of like a riff on the military industrial complex. So on a personal level, I had to deal with that. I've been a US taxpayer for about 3 years now, so I contribute to the military efforts of this country. And part of my income actually comes directly or indirectly from this complex, from the business of war, the business of killing people, the business of supposedly chasing terrorists and affirming American hegemony all around the world. So this convergence between military and entertainment doesn't happen only on a technological and research level. You're probably familiar with this kind of simulation for training soldiers and so on. But this convergence happens also on a cultural level. The current revolution in robotic warfare is often associated with the idea of gaming, so it kind of makes sense to talk about it using games. And it's not that easy, because we reach this point in which the real war is almost indistinguishable from the war portrayed in video games. This is a video juxtaposing footage from Call of Duty and real footage from bombers and drones deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. So on a visual level, they are kind of similar, and even on a on an experiential level, because now with drones you have a warfare that is mainly mediated by screens and operated via controllers that are very similar and actually designed like game interfaces. And even on a deeper level, the promise of drones is that allows people to fight without suffering the consequences of war, to sit and be essentially in a safe area. And that's kind of like the same premise of playing a game. You are in a safe situation. There's no risk in playing a game. So these two worlds seems to collide and overlap so much that I felt I had to do something about it. So for a while I thought there's not much that you can do. The only position you can take is the refusal of gaming action. This is an example of artists working with games and war. It's called Dead in Iraq by Joseph Delappe. It's a performative commemoration of the American casualties in Iraq. What this artist does is joining America's army servers, but he doesn't really fight, and every time he dies he types in the game chat the name of an actual fallen soldier, his or her rank and the date of death. So it creates this short circuit between virtual war as played in this game that was America's Army, and it's sponsored, created by the United States as a propaganda tool, as a recruiting tool, and kind of like bring some of the real war in these virtual arenas, and often soliciting very strong reaction from the players. According to Truffaut, the French director, all movies are pro-war, because no matter what their message is, they inevitably make the action look exciting. That's the case of several anti-war movies such as Apocalypse Now or Full Metal Jacket, that are also liked by people who like war, because they are kind of like intense and macho, and there is this magic of cinema that is kind of like a visceral fascination for moving images and the spectacle that might end up neutralizing the intellectual engagement of the viewer. So Truffaut probably solved that. His solution was probably to make movies about love instead of making movies about war or against war. But this problem of the action that can result into engagement regardless of the message, it's even a bigger problem with games, because games are so much more centered on action. And that's why many artists, like the one I just mentioned, intervened and talk about used games by essentially proposing an aesthetics of inaction, so kind of like rejecting the game form as a whole. It's almost like saying that when it comes to war, there's nothing you can do with games because they are already so just similar, or and if you have a game you can only break them or refuse to play. I tried this approach too at some point with this machinima video. Machinimas are videos shot inside video games, so this is not an interactive game, it's just an animation essentially done with real time 3D performed inside a server of America's Army. And here I try to diffuse the fast-paced action of America's Army and kind of creating a more meditative video. It's called Welcome to the Desert of the Real, and it doesn't quite look a typical America's Army session. The landscape, the desert, becomes more like an emotional landscape, and clips from the game are interspersed with questions taken from the post-traumatic stress disorder checklist, which is a questionnaire that is given to all the veterans coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq, and it gives an insight of what the experience of post-traumatic stress disorder is. So again, the idea was to short circuit this exciting propaganda game with the reality, with the psychological effect of real world. Still, I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to address these issues using an actual game, a game you can interact with, exploring the potential of games. So Unmanned is a narrative game about a day in the life of a drone pilot in Nevada. So it's imagining the daily routine of this new kind of soldier that essentially wake up every day and they are like just near Las Vegas and they commute for about an hour north and they sit into containers in front of computers, usually in strange hours at night or very early in the morning, and then they remote control drones in Pakistan or Afghanistan. And the game employs this two-channel setup and this two-channel gameplay. So it's a formal solution to express this theme of disconnection that runs through the whole game. This kind of dissociation of a soldier that is controlling unmanned aerial vehicles in Pakistan and then going home to his family in his suburban house. So you find yourself constantly multitasking between these interfering activities. You have to choose to prioritize one aspect over the other. For example, you can bond with your attention deficit disorder son, or you can focus on the game. It's a game within a game, sort of referencing Call of Duty, sort of war games. This is the central section of the game, which is a kind of twist on a dating sim. Here you have you're controlling the drone, and you can have either small talk or meaningful conversations with your colleague. You can even flirt with her. It's kind of mirroring the reconnaissance and hunter-killer mission on the side. So on one side you're sort of like following and eventually attacking this suspect insurgent, and on the other side you're sort of understanding and hitting on this girl that is your pilot. The idea is to disrupt the ability to become absorbed in your task, single-mindedly absorbed in your task, which is something that game designers usually value a lot, you know, to create immersion, to push the players into the zone. Artists and experimental filmmakers sometimes do the opposite. They try to take you in and out of the magic of cinema or art. They want to create some kind of critical distance, making sure that you are always aware and thinking about what you see and what you experience, rather than being lost in this wonderful world. And so that's the function of this jarring two-screen device. One of my main concerns in Unmanned was to experiment with a different kind of choice. Most of games pose you a very clear problem and ask you to solve it. Unmanned doesn't do it overtly. There are mini games, there are sort of tasks, and your actions get evaluated, but in a kind of ironic way. Each chapter ends with medals like this. So if you can shave successfully and you get a medal, you can be nice with your wife and you get a medal. And this is my take of this kind of like ironic satire of the idea of gamification and external rewards, kind of like getting points and badges for everything you do. So Unmanned, to some extent, is about game culture and about seeing your life as a video game with rewards and points everywhere. And those are rewards that are sort of like pathetic rewards that are appropriate for a pathetic 21st century kind of soldier hero. In Unmanned, instead of wandering a 3D world or 2D world, instead of looking at polygons, you sort of explore a more metaphorical space, I guess, a more like a non-physical space. You wander in the subconscious of this character. So you get to decide what this pilot, what this actually think and actually is. He can be a stock character, he can be an Air Force jock, or maybe a depressed commuter. He can be a strict and professional colleague or a charming guy. He can be a responsible father or an immature one. And to me, this is an exercise in speculation. This is a way to push players to think, like, what are these people thinking, and by extension, what do we think about this new kind of warfare, this different kind of warfare. We have to imagine what's going on in their heads, what kind of stories are telling themselves to justify their actions, what kind of stories are we telling ourselves as Western taxpayers to justify the fact that we are actually supporting this kind of actions and military adventures. How do they sleep at night? How do we sleep at night? Now, these examples are all taking advantage of an aspect of gaming that is role-playing, which is an important aspect of all games. But there's a potential also in a very different approach. Games are, at their core, they are systems. They are systems